Hey, and welcome to Ask Amadeus. We're going to give this a little shot on working on the Anchor app. I've used it before, I kind of left it. But in terms of getting things done on the internet, it's a pretty seamless system. And I believe that Spotify bought them a little while ago. So there we go. So today on Ask Amadeus, we're going to talk about Facebook and their fair housing charges, the Vessel, which is the new building that was just erected in downtown Manhattan, and then we're going to recommend some songs, and then we'll play them after in the Anchor app. This is how it's going to go. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll enjoy. So Facebook's in the news yet again, not this time for Russian bots or interfering with the elections or spying on you, but this time the FCC has slapped them with a fair housing charge, saying that their ads are discriminating against certain protected classes of people. This is a interesting claim, everyone kind of knows in the publishing industry that, for ads and clicks and things like that, is that basically a lot of these publishers are all consolidating to the major social media platforms. They're basically running 90% of the internet, and that's how they reach the consumers. And some of these ad products are very sophisticated, and you can use them as a real estate professional, of housing manager, whoever who wants to be involved in the real estate industry, as a targeted ad tool. So what this means is that if I have a property for sale, or I want to be a advertising broker in a certain area, you can geographically drop an ad in there. And then you can pick people based on their age, their sex, and I guess there used to be some of the other ethnic demographics that overlaid with protected classes on the federal level for housing practices. And then also you could pick on, for instance, you used to be able to pick, they work at JP Morgan, or they work at Brooklyn Brewery, or they work at XYZ. That was recently taken away. But this kind of raises a question of oversight in terms of real estate ads and ads in general. Should they be allowed to, say, just target a certain area? Are they allowed to do it based on sex or race or demographics or anything like that could kind of overlay with those advertising? It's not necessarily active discrimination, right? Because how it sits now is that, you have to grant people housing based on their financial qualifications and their age, sex, race, family status. Sexual orientation shouldn't be a factor. But that's on the transactional end. Is it to say that, some people sending these advertisings, are they using it incorrectly if they do that? It's an interesting question. They're under a lot of scrutiny right now, though. But I'd like to hear from you if you think that it's something that should be looked at, or is this sort of like a government overreach where, Facebook's providing a platform, but they're not actively discriminating anybody, but some people could construe the way that they solicit their ad products being indirectly in violation of fair housing or discrimination. So it's an interesting debate right now. I know they've got a lot of other things going on, but I thought this is the fun thing about the real estate and things like that, is that it applies to a lot of other businesses. A lot of small businesses use Facebook and things like that. Like how many people just like cupcakes in your little area and radius. So if you're interested to learn, if you're like a tech person who doesn't know about it, you're interested to learn more, we know about that as well. Just message me. We have some friends who could help you out. Thank you. We'll see you in the next section. Hey, we are back. If you're tuned into the Anchor app, you probably heard that last song we played. His name's Jack Harlow. Song is Sundown. Love that song. That's going to be the banger of the year. I know it. I can feel it. It was interesting because he's a rapper out of St. Louis or Kentucky? Lexington. That's the one. And it's just an interesting sound to hear from Lexington if you've ever been there. I didn't know they had a hip-hop scene. But it's cool. It's groovy. It's hip. It's psychedelic. He's got it going on. But speaking of ads and Facebook ads and things like that, I used to listen to him a couple months ago, and then I guess he got a brand deal with New Balance. He mentioned it in his song, and they're like, yo, this song is dope. And they gave him a ad deal, and then also he's using that to like respawn, like, ignite his career in summer festival and re-promote it using, that's Facebook ads and targeting and things like that. So it's interesting. It's if you can, for instance, if you have college rap music, are you advertising it to someone? Is it, Baby Shark, Pink Fang, you'd advertise that to babies or moms. But there's actually a lot of laws about advertising to kids under 12 years old. So we're not going to talk about that right now. It's a whole nother episode. So moving on, we are going to talk about The Vessel, which is this new attraction, very cool, futuristic art piece by the World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan. I guess they just opened it. There's a certain amount of people can go on at a time, but it's something to look at. It's beautiful. This is obviously a audio format, but on the Instagram or the Facebook and the YouTube, we'll put the imagery there as well. So if you are enjoying, subscribe to @Marcus Amadeus on all social media platforms and on Marcus Amadeus on iTunes. Just find my stuff. But anyways, back to The Vessel. The Vessel is interesting because there's an article came out is that, TF Cornerstone, a huge developer in New York City, they used to be actually a little bit bigger when they were, I think it was brothers maybe, that they were partners with Rock Rose. They split up the portfolio. It's two different buildings now, two different companies. But anyways, they built this semi-public feature in downtown Manhattan. And so, in the day of Instagram and social media and things like that, part of a lot, attention's everything, exposure's everything. It promotes your brand. It shows off the beautiful work and things like that. So this interesting question of property rights, intellectual rights, artistic rights meeting public rights, all's kind of coalescing on this one issue. In my opinion, I actually think it's a huge story that people aren't really addressing as much, and it will have greater impacts on our world in terms of, real life meets internet reality meets intellectual property rights of like an individual with these mediums and things like that. So anyways, the baseline of the story is that if you take a picture of this thing, this art piece, this architectural piece of art, that and you were with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your family, whatever, that whole picture, you do not own the rights to that picture, even though you created it or you're technically the content creator, original owner of that piece, right? So like you can own that image. Now, sometimes in the past, there's been issues where Facebook has taken people's images and sold them in other countries to do ads. There was about a backlash. They didn't do that anymore. She got paid. Basically, one of her friends was on vacation and saw her on a billboard in Australia. I digress. We're back to The Vessel. If you're in there, they own that. So, like, what are they going to do with that? They're going to do they just want to have like advertising rights with it? Are they going to monetize those photos? If you're a social media influencer and you go there and say you get paid for your posts, do they own that now? Like, can you monetize that post? Can Facebook pay you? Facebook and Instagram are one. Does Facebook pay you on that? Can you be sued to monetize the photo that TF Cornerstone possibly might own that you're posting now? And I think this is interesting because, in the day and the age we're in, with social media and, social media, big media kind of losing things, like people becoming their own media producers, they're becoming aware of these laws that exist between, rights to privacy and public and private space, and how the things can be monetized and how they're used. So it's just interesting. So it's getting into this gray area where, they built this thing. They paid an architect. It took years. But it's semi-public private space, because even if you have to pay a ticket or whatever, you have to go in, it's still part of the skyline, and people are taking it from a public space. And as it is now, you're allowed to basically film anything in a public space. You can't film in private space without their permission. There's some dual consent laws on that in the street. I'm not sure so much about New York and like LA, where there's a film business and there's a lot more, probably more attention around it and all that, and so that comes into like paparazzi and things like that. But as an individual and as not a public figure or someone who just wants to have their rights intact, what does that mean for the consumer? Like what's going on with all these 30, 40, 50, 100,000 photos that have been taken the last couple days, and then now we're going to be in the public domain, moving forward, I guess. Like, it's like, who owns those now? So I'm interested where the judge will land and where the social consensus lies. I really think that this should be like a super big story, but we're all worried about like Jesse Schmolitz and the Mueller investigation that came back empty-handed. Like, people should be worried about giant companies owning semi-intellectual property in like the real world that, to this point was property of the individual and like the content creator. So I think that's interesting. It's an interesting overlay between real estate, architecture, and the public sphere and the individual. So hope you enjoyed that one. We'll be back in a second. Hey, we're back. If you were tuned into the Anchor app, you heard that song. That was Mac Miller, Ladders, for the late Mac Miller, with his last album, Swimming. Song Ladders, great song, banger, tuner. It's good for a Friday. But this is going to lead us into our last section about kind of rights and IP of digital rights and things like that. Just recently, Conor McGregor was in the news for a lot of stuff. Maybe he retired, maybe he got into some case with the girl in Ireland. But specifically, I wanted to talk about the public celebrityness of him coming out of a club and some guy trying to videotape him in a public space. Granted, it was 5 a.m. and was out of a club, maybe didn't want to be filmed. And the guy kind of like walked up on him a little bit, was like kind of introduced space, and then had like a selfie with him and didn't ask. But who's right there? Who's wrong? He's a public celebrity. Do you have a right to privacy in public spaces? Do you own those images of you coming in and out that maybe you didn't want taken? If you're not trying to make a media relations event if you're not doing it at that time? Like, where does it stop? You know, back in the day, you know, the people, you know, you would use things to see people on their private property is a big deal, but about those images like TMZ and things like that. But who owns that picture? Does that guy who took it own it? He got his phone smashed. I don't know why you would do that with like a fighter like that. Does Connor own that? It's interesting. And then also it's interesting to think about when you translate this into, for instance, the UFC just got a new media deal with ESPN, and these fighters, they get paid for the fight. But we're looking at the early days of the internet. You know, like that piece of media, that fight, if it goes down and is a great all-time fight, if that's on the internet for 10 years, as the way it's going, it's going to continue to sell ad dollars like in perpetuity, right? If it's something amazing, right? Like, does that fighter own that piece of media that they have, and should they? I mean, listen, I don't think people were thinking about the impacts of how that translates into the future. You know, I think it's a little maybe short-sighted, and maybe some of these giant media corporations are aware of that. So it's interesting to think about that. And then, you know, with Mac Miller here too, it was circling back to Facebook, right? And the advertising on Facebook and how you can monetize it and how you want to use it to target certain people. You know, kind of similar to the Fuck Jerry and the Big Jew. But even just like something like Mac Miller, like there's a lot of like Mac Miller fan pages after he died. And the family was a little bit in question of, there's a little bit of a question of like, obviously he has his property and has his record deals, but like the image on the internet, that's forever. And these people maybe making merch or using these like fake merch or making these like repost accounts, like, are they allowed to do that? Are they allowed to monetize it? Like, who owns is that something that is going to should be checked about how to monetize that? It's just I don't know if that could go on for so long. So, but to recap, overall, we talked about Facebook. I'd like to hear about your response. We talked about Facebook. Are they allowed to advertise these super hyper specific ads that are part of the value that they bring? Are they allowed to do it all the way? Is it an all or nothing thing? And in terms of it comes to housing, are they discriminating against people? Are they doing it, or are they enabling it? It's interesting. Let me know. And then number 2, the vessel, the building downtown. Can I own there? Do I get those pictures? Are those my pictures? Who owns those pictures? TF Cornerstone? Is the public? Do I own them? Is Mary Jo 55 with a million influencers? Is she allowed to use that photo? Let's find out. Someone tell me. Go do the research, please. Maybe I will. Maybe we'll go down there and we'll talk to some people. And then number 3, public space. Do you own that? Does a private individual have the right to privacy in public space on the sidewalk in New York City or LA? Does the public individual figure, do they have it as well? Are they allowed to have that? Who owns those rights? And is it discriminating against the public to take their photos, or distinguishing between a private individual and a public individual? They're still a person, right? And they're still an individual. All these questions. There's so many questions. So we'll just wrap this up. This is Ask Amadeus. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe, tell your friend. And we're also going to make a ongoing playlist in Spotify if you want to follow it, at Marcus Amadeus, Ask Amadeus. And enjoy. Have fun. Get ready for the weekend. Oh, yeah, and that's true. It's the weekend. It's coming up. It's rental season in New York. Call me. Thank you. We'll do a little outro with my contact. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate this. We're going to do this on a weekly basis from here on out. And as you know, if you are interested in buying, selling, renting a home in New York City, please give me a call at Marcus Amadeus, DM me, or you can go to my website, www.marcusamadeus.com. You can find me there. Love to help you out. Or if you just need some advice, just text me. I also have my other account, which is just going to be strictly real estate. This one's going to be a little more fun. It's at marcus.schott, SCHOTT. That's me. All right, enjoy. Have a good day. Bye.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.